Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening to this live stream episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. For tonight's show, we're going to bring on a Sasquatch researcher. It's been a while since we've had a Bigfoot researcher on the show, but of course they have Dogman Encounters too, and it's kind of an ironic situation with tonight's guest. You see, she's been researching Sasquatch for 23 years now, and at one point, before she had her Dogman encounter, that is, she and her friends who used to research Sasquatch, well, they used to make fun of people who saw dogmen, or at least one lady who they knew who told them or tried to tell them about a dogman encounter that she had. Well, a little over a week ago, actually a week and one day before today, she and three of her researching friends had a dogman encounter that really shook them to the core. And of course, that's what we're going to talk with her about tonight. Of course, I'm talking about Lisa Leach. Lisa, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Vic. I never expected to be here, but if I was going to be anywhere talking about Dogman, I'm glad I found you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. And you never really do expect to have a dogman encounter until it happens. I'm so sorry to hear that you had to have that experience. If I had my druthers, I'd much rather have you in the camp of people that just didn't believe they existed than for you to know as a fact due to unfortunate circumstances that they really are out there. But yeah, we're going to get into all of that in about 10 minutes. But before we get to that point, I want to talk with you about your research that you put into Sasquatch. Now, approximately 23 years ago, you started researching Sasquatch, and that was due to an encounter you had with a Bigfoot that paid you a late night visit when you were 10. If I had my druthers, like I said before, all the time that you spent out in the woods, you'd have your mind on nothing but Sasquatch. But now that you know dogmen are out there also, which that's a new concern for you, what are your thoughts on that? How are you going to be able to function out there?
Well, initially, right after seeing this thing, I didn't think I would. I was pretty sure I would not be able to stay out in the woods again. But the night afterwards, we forced ourselves to stay there overnight in the camp, which, you meet your fears like that. And afterwards, you survived and you feel a little better. But I still wasn't so sure about being able to stay out in a tent by myself. And I've talked to you and you've made me feel a lot better about it by understanding that they've always been there and I just didn't know it until now.
That's right. They most definitely have been out there. And like I told you in that first conversation we had, think about how many times you've been out there looking for Sasquatch when these guys were around watching you. Nothing happened any of those times, so that doesn't mean it's any more likely for you to have problems now. Sure, it's possible that you're going to have another dogman encounter, but yeah, that's not a given. It's all too easy to think that once you have a dogman encounter, you're almost doomed to have another and then another. But yeah, in most cases, that just doesn't happen. So please keep that in mind. But I've got a question for you that I meant to ask you the first time we spoke that it just slipped my mind. I never did ask you about this. You told me that you had a friend when she found out that you were so distraught about this dogman encounter you had. She told you that you needed to contact me. Who is this friend?
I think it was Elise Orr that told me that. She is one of our members of our Bigfoot and Female Friends of the South, the all female group that I'm in. And I think she was the one who told me because she's always believed they were out there.
She's not the one who had her own dogman encounter, is she?
No, whole totally different friend.
Okay, I thought it must have been. I didn't want to assume because you know what that does. But yeah, I was pretty sure it wasn't the same person. Do you think that it's going to be some time before you're going to be ready to head back out into the woods and actually look for Sasquatch? Or do you think you're maybe going to be able to do that sooner than what most people would expect?
Well, I will probably head back out next month. And that's just, I'm addicted to Sasquatch research. And I really don't think anything would keep me out of the woods, but I won't be alone. And we're always armed and we're always ready for anything. So even though I'm a little nervous about going back out there again, I do think I will be.
Well, good. I hope you do. Not too much weight on a young back, but when you're good and ready to do that, I hope you do, and baby steps, of course. I hope you do start heading back out there. You know, it's funny, I told you about the walks I take deep in the woods when I have time to be able to do that, that is. Well, since we spoke for the first time, I actually have been back out into the big woods and went on a nice long mile. Well, actually, it was miles that I headed in, but yeah, went on another walk. I wasn't armed and didn't have anyone else with me, and here I am again. Like I told you in that first conversation, when I get time to do that, I do that. And here I am in this forest where there are dogmen. There's Sasquatch in that forest too. In fact, I had a Sasquatch related experience not too long ago, less than a month ago in those woods. But yeah, life goes on. Life goes on. I hope you enjoy every single minute of it, and you really don't let this experience cut your legs out from underneath of you, because if you allow that to happen, it really would be a shame. Of course, you have to do this in a metered way, and like I said, take baby steps getting back out there. But when you're ready to head back out into the woods, I really hope you do.
Well, there will be some things that I won't initially be able to do. Like we used to hike in the woods, or down the road, just walking in the middle of the night. And I think it'll be a little while before I'll be able to do that again. But as far as going out, to the campsite and maybe riding to an investigation area, I'll probably be staying in the car for a while, but I'll work myself back up to it.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, do what you need to do. Sleep in the car, take baby steps, like I said, in your own good time. You'll know when you're ready. And when you are, just take a bigger step, and then a bigger step after that, just in your own good time. As you know, there's never any rush to do this. And as far as taking guns out there to try and quote unquote protect yourself from dogmen or Sasquatch, that's just a fallacy, in my opinion. I mean, these guys, if they really wanted to get you, a gun's not going to protect you from them. And if it did protect you, for example, Sasquatch or what you focus on, if you did happen to have to actually, in whatever situation, have to shoot a Sasquatch, then what about the other Sasquatch in the area? So, yeah, I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why I just don't count on a gun to protect myself from them out there in the woods, because if they really wanted to get you, they would, whether you have a gun or not.
Oh yeah, the gun's not for protection against Sasquatch or not Dogman because I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work anyways, but it's for protection from other people and from hogs and things like that.
Oh, sure. And yeah, that's always a good idea. But some people, they take a gun with them for the express reason of protecting themselves or trying to protect themselves from Sasquatch. Now, yeah, if a Sasquatch sees a gun, some of the Sasquatch in those instances will be frightened away, but there have been countless reports from credible eyewitnesses where they encountered a Sasquatch and that Sasquatch wasn't frightened off by them having a gun with them. And I mean, what's the end game here? Like I said, if you do have to actually shoot one, it's not like that's going to guarantee your protection, because in most cases, that's just the beginning of your problems. So, yeah, that was more of a comment that was addressed to the public than to you, because after speaking with you, I was pretty sure you knew better anyway.
Yeah, no. I don't think it would do a bit of good in either case. You probably just make something more mad.
That's right. Yeah, there are a lot of accounts to back that up, too. Well, let's get into it now, Lisa. In your own good time, when you're ready, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm in a Bigfoot and Female Friends of the South group, and five of us decided to go out camping in the Kisatchie National Forest in central Louisiana. Um, I can't give away the exact location because it's one of our research areas, but we were primitive camping and we're not at a campground. We were pretty secluded. And we just decided, well, the first night we were there, we kept hearing coyotes and something else would yell with the coyotes before the coyotes would go off. And we assumed it was a Sasquatch because, that's just what you assume when you're out there and you don't believe in dogmen. And so we were pretty hyped about that. And it all night long, it did it 4 or 5 times. We would hear it, and then the coyotes would go off. And we actually got a recording of that, and I'll have to send it to you when I get it downloaded. But we decided that second night we were there, that Thursday last week, to take some equipment, some blasting equipment, and some recordings that we had found that were supposed Sasquatch recordings, like the Ohio recording. And we decided to ride down the road and blast these sounds out the window. And of course, I have my own call that I do that's a lot different from many other researchers' calls. And so at one point we stopped and we were blasting, and one of the ladies, the lady that was driving, her name's Alicia, um, she felt very uneasy, and she couldn't figure out why, and she just kept telling us something's not right. Well, we realized there were no sounds anywhere. It was just total quiet. And although we've been in that before, and many times we just said, well, there's a predator around, and Sasquatch comes in the area, you always know that all of the smaller critters and things are going to be quiet. Well, it was like that night, but it was an uneasy quiet. It was not that quiet that you normally get. It was a quiet that came with a feeling of strangeness, of unease. And we continued to drive down the road, and we had found a road that had a weird name, and it was called Strange Road. And we said, well, let's just go check this road out because there's a reason it has that name. All of the roads that have these strange names usually have a history. So we headed down that road blasting, and on the way back, about the same area where I had let out that one yell that I did, we were riding with our headlamps on, and I had mine set on the red because sometimes that will show you a lot of eye shine, but yet it doesn't agitate the animal's eyes too bad. But you can still pick up on the eye shine. And we had seen several sets of eye shine, but one was an owl, and we sat and we watched it for a minute, and there were some deer. And then as we're riding down the road, we passed this one area. It's a small clearing on the side of the road. I saw what I thought were these orange reflectors, and I yelled, "What was that? Stop, back up, back up, back up, back up." And Alicia was driving, and I had a friend, Elise Orr, in the back seat, and she was on the driver's side. And then I was on the passenger side. We had all of our windows rolled down. She backed up, and as she was backing up, I flipped my spotlight on, and she flipped hers on. And when we backed up, I really expected, if it was an animal, that it wouldn't still be there, because normally when you see something on the side of the road, I'm familiar with bears and deer and even hogs and stuff. When you back up, it normally runs from you. So I was kind of expecting it to be gone. But when we backed up, it was still sitting there, same spot, about 30 feet from my side of the vehicle. And we're just looking at these eyes, and they were the color of our campfire flames. That's the way I described them. They were flame orange, a yellowish orange, and they were huge. Oh my God, they were huge. They were had to have been sitting on this massive head, because these eyes looked like they were sitting on a head that would have been a foot wide. And we're just sitting there staring at it for a moment, and it's just staring back at us. And it's about 5 foot off the ground, and we're trying to figure out what we're looking at. And we're just mesmerized, and you could feel this, oh gosh, like it was just looking straight through you, like it could just look into your soul. And we could tell that it had no fear whatsoever of us. and I think it knew we were scared a bit. But we had time to sit there and stare at this thing for a period of time where we had a conversation of the lady in the back, Elise, she kept asking, What are y'all seeing?" And Alicia said, "You don't wanna know." And I said, "No, you don't." And Elise said, "Well, what is it? Is it a hog or something?" And I said, "There is nothing in this area of the world that is that big." And Alicia was in agreement. She told her, "No, there's not. We don't know what that is." And Elise was still saying, "Well, what is it? What is it? I can't see." And I said, "Elise, you don't want to know." And as far as the body, you could see this black, just blackness. It was like a black mass. You couldn't really make out any of the body except that it was black. And these eyes, they were so, they didn't have pupils. They didn't have any whites in the eyes, and they never blinked. They never blinked one time. And we were just, I, I can't even explain how we were like staring at something that we couldn't figure out, that didn't make sense to us. And Alicia decided that she'd had enough. She was shook to the core, and she went to take off on the gravel road, and she hit the gas. And just as she hit the gas and we started rolling, that thing stood up, and I yelled, "That thing just stood up." And she said, "What?" She said, "How big is it?" I said, "At least twice as tall." And she said, "That'd be 10 feet." And I said, "I know, but I can't explain it. It just stood up." But, well, I missed a part because while we were sitting there, it turned its head. It turned its head sideways. It looked to its left like it heard something or was interested in something else to its left. It was our right, its left. And when it did, that's when you could tell from the outline that it was canine in appearance. It was like this massive canine. And I never saw any ears, but Alicia said she thought she saw an outline of ears sticking up on its head. But I was mostly in shock because it stood up, and that didn't make any sense. I was like, it was already standing as far as we had thought it was already standing, but I don't know if it was crouching or if it had been sitting. But when it stood up, it had to be 10 foot tall, and that just freaked me out. And so we went back to the campsite, which turned out to only be 7/10 of a mile from where we saw it. And we sat there, we were shaking, and everybody was asking what happened. And I was so emotional. I was crying. I've had Bigfoot encounters, but they make sense, and this didn't. And I just had to calm down. I couldn't speak about it. I couldn't talk at all. I just told them, "Give me a few minutes." Just and they understood, and Alicia was the same way. She saw it too, and she was just as shook as I was. And we were sitting there going, "Why did we see a body?" Because that's what bothered us the most. Aside from the eyes and it being so tall, we were confused because we both had spotlights on it and we couldn't see a body. And we were looking at the trees in the spotlight beside it and behind it, but this body was just black, and it was blacker than black. It was almost like an absence of color. It like it didn't reflect the light, like it absorbed the light. And the eyes were the same way. They didn't reflect. They normally when you spotlight an animal, you get this like glare from a reflection. And these weren't reflecting like normal eyes. They were soaking up the light, I want to say. They were more of a glow that didn't glare like normal eyes. I can't even explain it. It was, I don't know. It just didn't seem right. And we told everybody else what we had seen, and they were freaking out too. And the lady that was in the back seat, Elise, she was like, "Well, I wish I'd seen it." And I said, "No, I really don't think you do wish you had seen it. I think you should be glad you didn't, because nothing has ever shaken me up like that." I didn't believe that dogmen or werewolves or whatever you want to call it. In Louisiana, we call it a rougarou. But I didn't believe those were real. Those were just legends. And, as far as people who had said they had seen them, who am I to question if anybody's seen anything? But I always thought they were just mistaken on what they had seen. And maybe they had seen a Bigfoot. You always, when you're a Bigfoot researcher, you always try to make everything Bigfoot. And I always thought all of those sightings were just misidentified Bigfoot. So this was not supposed to exist, and it has totally blown my world apart. And I don't know what to do with that.
Well, like I told you the first time we spoke, it'd be one thing if your first exposure to these guys was when you had that encounter about 8 days ago. But I all but guarantee all the times you've been out in the woods, all the countless hours you've been beating the bushes, like I told you in that conversation, more times than you could shake a stick at, these guys have been watching you, following you, monitoring you. Nothing happened any of those times. So there's nothing to lead you to believe that any of the future times you head into the woods, anything negative is going to happen to you. It's possible, but I just don't think you're going to have any more problems. You might see another dog, like I said, but the odds of actually being harmed by one are very slim. So please keep that in mind. And this isn't a guaranteed explanation for it, but you mentioned how the body, you shine spotlights on its body, but you still couldn't see it. Well, were you aware that bison, for example, they have fur that soaks up sunlight and soaks up light, period? So if you shine a spotlight on a bison, it does the same thing. You don't see the glow of your light. It's like their fur absorbs that light. Did you know that?
No, I absolutely did not know that.
Yeah, that's true. That's how it is. Yeah, countless people have come around a corner on roads in Montana, Wyoming, where there are bison, and they've hit them because they didn't see them until the last second because their headlights were absorbed by that fur. I can't remember what the term is for that, but yeah, their fur has that quality or it actually absorbs light. So, again, that's not a guaranteed explanation for why you couldn't see the body of that dog, man, but it's a possibility. It's something to think about.
Okay, yes, it absolutely is. That would make more sense. And when you initially told me that they had been out there all this time, I was that didn't make me feel better at first, because I was like, "No, don't give me that. I don't want to think about that." Because I was like, "I never want to see this thing again." And we always, when we sat around the campfire, doing our Bigfoot stuff or whatever, somebody would bring up the subject, and we'd stop them and we go, "No, we don't talk about that. We don't want to talk about that, because we don't want to believe that that exists, because we may not ever go back in the woods again." And that's what we always said. And, I'm concerned about Alicia more than myself, because she was a new researcher and she's not had the scary Bigfoot encounters that I've had and some of the others have had. And for her, this was a real eye opener, and I mean, she's not even experienced a Bigfoot yet. And here she is seeing this werewolf looking thing that's not supposed to be out there. And I probably will have to wean her back into things.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like I told you in that conversation, if she would benefit from a conversation with me, there's never any requirement to come on the show. Just have her let me know that I'm more than happy to help. And if she is interested in reaching out, helping for a helping hand, that is, then yeah, have her contact me. I'd be more than happy to help her or anyone else in your group or anyone else that you know who's had an encounter that would like to have some help. So please keep that in mind.
Yeah, she and I are the only two that actually saw it, but she steadily has been she lives in Georgia, and she's been texting me constantly since then, trying to come up with any explanation, and she's been like, "Well, maybe it was this, but no, that don't fit. Well, I tried to think this, but no, that don't fit either." And she's like, "Nothing fits, nothing makes sense." And I told her, I said, "Look, I did the same thing when I first saw it. When I first saw it stand up, I was like, well, maybe it went up a hill or maybe it climbed a tree, but neither of those were anywhere near where we were." And you just try to do that. You try to think of something that makes sense out of it without admitting to yourself what you've seen. But she may have to call you and speak with you before it's all over with, because I don't think she's taking it very well.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like she is. Well, like I said, if she needs help, I'll be here for her. So, yeah, please let her know. We've already established the fact that you didn't believe in dogmen before you had that encounter 8 days ago, but before that point, had you ever heard about any quote unquote dogman encounters happening in the Kitsatchie?
Well, I actually hadn't even heard the term dog man or anything like that until about 2 years ago, when one of our members was camping with us, and she mentioned that she thought she had a dog man that had came up behind her house. And she told us about this thing growling at her, and she had taken pictures of the footprint, and it's this big footprint. It's wide in the front and it comes down real narrow in the back, and it's got these claws on it about it. I don't know, about an inch and a half, 2 inches long. And of course, when she showed me the picture, I was of course trying to make it a big footprint, and I'm going, well, maybe those are toenails, but they obviously weren't. They were claws, and I had to admit I didn't know what that was a picture of, but she was telling us that. And of course, you want to believe somebody, but at the same time, you're like, well, she's mistaken. She's got a big foot. I don't know what she's got a picture of, footprint. I don't know. When, we thought, well, she's a little crazy. But like I said, we didn't believe there was such a thing. And now I have since spoken to her and I said, look, I did. I thought you were crazy. I said, I'm sorry, because if you experienced something that I experienced, I said, I feel so bad for making fun of that. And I apologized to her because, that was just wrong. I don't know why we tend to do that. If it doesn't fit into our little box, we want to make fun of it or just not believe it, or, I don't think it's so much as not believing somebody as it is for your own safety. You don't want to admit that that's out there. I do the same thing with skinwalkers. I'm like, I don't want to hear about them. I don't want to talk about them. I don't ever want to see one, and doesn't mean that it's not out there. It just means that I don't want to believe they're out there, you know?
I do understand. Yeah, it's a lot more convenient to convince yourself that these guys aren't out there because if you can do that, then heading into the woods is a lot easier. Well, understanding how they operate, that has a huge effect on how easy it is to head into the woods, too. But yeah, I mean, if you can convince yourself that they're not a reality, that's the easiest out. So it's totally understandable why you would do that. But that brings me to my next question for you before I start asking the questions that the listeners have for you. My last question for you is, are you glad knowing that they're actually out there, or if you had your druthers, would you rather just not know, even though they're amongst you when you're in the woods?
Well, I always said I would rather not know, but the more I've thought about it, I'm glad I do know now, and I'm glad I actually experienced one in a way that didn't feel too threatening so that I'm not terrified as I would be if something like, came at me or, they would have chased the truck when we left or something, I'm glad I experienced it in the way that I did, and I am glad that I know they're there now.
Well, that's a good outlook. Never lose sight of the fact that you're a strong woman, Lisa, and you can definitely deal with this. It's all attitude, it's all in how you look at it. If you let human nature get the best of you, then yeah, you will have trouble dealing with the fact that yes, they are out there. But if you don't turn that direction, if you do focus on the truth, then yeah, this is doable. So please remember that. And yeah, please do your best to remember all the things that we spoke about these guys. Okay.
Oh, I sure will. That'll probably keep me going. My husband always said that I was not afraid of anything, which I think he exaggerates, but you know, I I have been through a lot of stuff in my past, so it was hard to scare me with things, but I had to admit that really shook me to the core. And speaking with you has now made me understand that I've been out there for years now and I've never been injured by one of these things. And I'm sure they've been there. And as a matter of fact, I've been to the same area before many times. And, although I didn't see one, I know now they were there all along.
Yes, they were. It's not convenient to think about. It's not going to give you the warm and fuzzies, but yeah, they definitely were. And oh, yeah, there's one last thing I want to bring up before I start diving into the listener questions. When we spoke about this for the first time earlier this week, there was something that we spoke about, something I brought to your attention that it sounded to me, I could be wrong about this, but it sure sounded to me like what I told you, what I brought to your attention shook you more than pretty much anything to do with all this. Remember how I told you, or I asked you, if you realized that when you headed back to camp, you didn't head home after that encounter, you headed back to camp, which you told me was about 7/10 of a mile from where that encounter happened. And then I told you that I could all but guarantee that that dog man followed you back to camp, and those sounds that you heard outside of your tent that night, at least some of them, there's a strong possibility it was that dog man lurking around. Do you remember me telling you about that?
I do. And that just kind of went all through me. I was like, oh no, don't say that because that night, that's all I was picturing is there's everything I heard was, is that that thing? Is that that thing? And I was so unnerved just thinking about the fact that it could have followed us back. That didn't even really occur to me. I just thought my adrenaline was kicked in and that I was just thinking that. And I kept telling myself, no, that thing was 7/10 of a mile down the road. It looked the opposite direction. And my saving grace was that it did look the opposite direction. And when it stood up, it was facing the opposite direction. So I was thinking, telling myself that it went the other way. And then when you said that, I was like, oh no, don't say that. I don't want to think about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, not convenient to think about, but I want to shoot you straight on this. And yeah, when you look at the big picture when it comes to Dogman, it helps tremendously. That's what you should always try to do. When you step back and take a 1,000-foot view of this experience, it's only going to help. The problems only arise when you start to look at snippets of what happened. When you think about, oh, that Dogman was right there, so close to the vehicle. But don't modify that and go into detail, ignore the fact that, okay, yeah, that dog man was that close to us, but he didn't attack us. He never acted aggressively towards us. And then looking at it from a different aspect of this whole encounter, yeah, there's a strong possibility that dog man was right outside our tent that night. Well, yeah, that's true, but you're leaving out the part that there's a strong possibility that dog man was right outside our tent that night, but it never harmed us. So, yeah, look at the big picture. That's what's going to be required for you to deal with this in a healthy way. I know you can do this. I know you can. It's just going to take time and repetition until this becomes second nature. Makes sense?
Yeah, I actually had to have another lady sleep in my tent that night, but and I'll probably have to do that for a little while, at least the next few outings. But it is true. If it wanted to have came after us, we were only 7/10 of a mile down the road, and if it did follow us back, we were right there. We were in flimsy tents, and it could have had us.
That's right. It knew that, but yeah, it never pushed the issue and attacked you because it didn't want to. That's the best possible reason there is. All right, well, let's dive into the listener questions now, Lisa. The first one is from Lycan Fire Fear, and their question is, Lisa, why do you think Dogman didn't exist? Why did you think Dogman didn't exist and made fun of eyewitnesses?
Well, like I said, it wasn't really that I absolutely didn't think they existed. I didn't want to think they existed. And as far as the witnesses, I just like I said, it was just one of those it's a safety mechanism I think that you do for yourself to keep you from being so afraid because the thought of something like that being out there before I even actually saw one was like I, I didn't want it to keep me out of the woods, you know? I just didn't want to be that scared. And I think I was more scared of them before I saw them than I am now, if that makes any sense.
Well, before you had that encounter, you didn't know what would happen if you did see one, but now you know what would happen because it has happened. You had that encounter, and here we are having this conversation, and you're going to enjoy this weekend and you're going to continue on living your life. And no, you didn't find out the hard way that these guys are some kind of bloody, mindless, monstrous killing machines that'll wipe you off the face of the earth as soon as look at you because yeah, that's not how they're wired. Sure, there are some dangerous ones, but as far as in general, they are not wired that way. The numbers prove that to be a fact. All right, I've got another question for you from Murtaza Arif. And Murtaza's question is, do you think the dogman was attracted by your headlights?
Honestly, no, I think it was attracted by the sounds that we were blasting, and the area where we actually saw it was in the same area that I had made that call that I do, and the one that I do is a little deeper than most people's calls, and I think it was attracted to that.
You just might be right about that. It's hard to say for sure, but there's a strong possibility you are right. The next question is from Patricia Della Vega, and her question is, were you frightened? Were you scared, Lisa?
Oh, yes, to my core. I was shaking so badly. Like I said, I got emotional and I started crying. I was so scared. I've never been that scared of anything before in my life. I mean, even when I was 10 and a Bigfoot was looking in my window and I was paralyzed with fear back then, I don't think I was that scared then because I didn't know what that was back then, but at least it made more sense to me than what I was looking at the other day. That didn't make any sense. That to me was just like beyond comprehension, and that's what shook me to my core.
Which is totally understandable. And you just mentioned that Bigfoot encounter you had when you were 10. So everyone listening knows, of course, I also produce a Bigfoot podcast called My Bigfoot Sighting. Well, Lisa actually recorded an episode. It's actually airing tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's available right now. If you want to listen to that episode that Lisa came on and talked about that encounter she had when that Bigfoot paid her that late night visit when she was 10, if you go to the description for tonight's show, you'll find a link that'll take you right to it. If you don't want to do that, if you just want to find it on your own, if you go to YouTube or use your favorite podcast application, just do a search for My Bigfoot Sighting, And then if you look up episode 125, you'll find tonight's episode with Lisa talking about that experience and several other Sasquatch related experiences that she's had. Moving forward, we have a great question here from Lily Lewis. And Lily wants to know, Lisa, do you think you're going to start researching them as well?
Oh my gosh. I don't think I will go looking for them, but I think anytime that I'm out in the field researching Bigfoot, I think that I will be watching for them. And now I go back and wonder if some of the experiences that I've already thought were Bigfoot weren't possibly Dogman even then.
Yeah, just might have been. You never know. And I see a question from Glendon Hartwell. He wanted to know, how big was the biggest one you've seen? Well, she's only seen one, that 10-footer. So that's the biggest one. The next question is from Murtaza Arif, and he wants to know, do you think your car headlights attracted the dogman to show itself?
I don't know because it wasn't where you could see it from the truck, from the headlights, because it was 30 foot off the side of the road in a small clearing area, and I don't think we would have even noticed it if I hadn't had my headlamp on.
You probably wouldn't have, but there's that possibility that you would have noticed its eyes. So there's a strong possibility, actually, that would have happened, but you never know. It's hard to say. The next one is from Baby Girl, and her question is, you said its fur was black. Did it have any color in its fur?
No, no, all we saw was just black. That's it.
That makes it easy. Well, the next question is from Amun Reye 144. And Amun's question is, do you think it's possible to film one of the dogmen?
Well, I think if I would have had a camera that was, already right there, maybe on the truck, it would have picked it up. But as far as, I'm sure we all had cameras on our phones, and not once did we even think about picking it up to film this thing. And I think it's because the shock of it all, it's just not something you think about. It's the same thing with people who have other sightings of other cryptids. The last thing on their mind is looking for something to record it, or looking for something to take a picture of it or anything. It's just not something you think about doing when you're in the moment.
Well, you know the old adage, everyone has a plan until they get hit. So that definitely fits here. Couldn't agree more. UFO drone guy wants to know regarding singing. I guess he's talking about the calls that you do. When do you get the best results, day or night? Thanks.
Well, like I said, we're usually researching Sasquatch, and we're usually doing all of our calls at night. And we've never actually, tried calling to them during the day, though we've had some things happen during the day. It's usually stuff being thrown, and, trees have been pushed down and limbs broke off and things like that. But I don't think they make as much sound during the day as at night. But as far as Dogman's concerned, I absolutely have no idea about them because I've just now knew they were real.
The education starts now. Yeah, that's not your fault. The next one is from T to E, and her question is, do you think the dog man is flesh and blood or supernatural?
Oh gosh, that's hard to say. I think what I saw looked flesh and blood, and at the same time didn't make any sense. And I think they're probably just like most Bigfoot. And as far as I'm concerned, there's both running around out there. And, I won't go any further than that on saying that, but I think there are both. I think there's some that's biological, and then there are some that may be altered in some way. I can't say for sure, but Dogman's probably the same way.
Yeah, there's a strong possibility. And there is a comment in the chat that I want to address. It's a canard. A canard is a commonly held belief that's incorrect. And this statement is incorrect. I'm not going to name the person who made this comment because it's not their fault. They just don't know. But when eyewitnesses read comments like this, not knowing any better, it just perpetuates the problem that a lot of eyewitnesses wind up having. The comment is Bigfoot and Dogman are not your friends. Well, I can't say I disagree with that. I do disagree strongly with the next part. These are dangerous creatures, and to go looking for them or to be naive to think they won't kill you is insane. Well, yes, they will kill you if you do things that are very foolish, or if you happen to run into a dangerous one. I'm never going to say there's no such thing as a dangerous dogman or a dangerous Sasquatch, but if what she's trying to say in her comment is that as soon as they have an opportunity to kill you, they will, or to harm you, they will, that is totally false. Totally false. There's a huge group of people out there who have this crazy idea that these guys are wired to kill you as soon as the opportunity presents itself. If that's the case, then why have I literally spoken with thousands and thousands of Dogman eyewitnesses over the years? I've been doing this since 2007, and who knows how many of these people, eyewitnesses I've spoken with, were caught dead to rights, on foot, in the woods, no one else around, no weapon. Not that the weapon would make a difference, but within grabbing distance even in a lot of cases. But they were allowed to leave without a single scratch, not a single hair in their heads being harmed. That's because what I say is true. These guys are not wired to harm you as soon as the opportunity presents itself. I know it's all too easy to believe that because of how these guys look, how frightening they are, the things they do to frighten us, to make us think that they do want to kill us as soon as look at us. But understand, that is definitely not the case. Now, people will say, yeah, I can appreciate you saying that, Vic, but what about the people who have been killed by these guys? They can't come talk with you. And that's true. That's true. They can't. But that still doesn't erase the fact that I've spoken with so many eyewitnesses who were caught dead to rights. And if the dogman that they encountered had it on its mind that it wanted to murder them, slaughter them, have them for lunch, dinner, you name it, then I wouldn't have had an opportunity to speak with these people. So, yeah, that does rule out the possibility that these guys are wired to be that dangerous. Because, again, that's not the case. It's not. The next question is from, well, that's a goofy question there, so we're going to do away with that. The next question will be from Susie, a lady. Her question is, what color eyes did you say it had?
I called them fire orange. Because I was just sitting at a campfire earlier and it was the color of the campfire flames, and that's a yellowish orange color.
A yellowish orange. Well, that's par for the course. That's what most eyewitnesses report when they tell me about a dogman encounter they had. And then Lycan Fire Fear has a comment. He basically is actually asking me, are you sure about that? A dogman killed a whole family in the land between the lakes near Kentucky, and a dogman was going to kill 4 teenagers in Ohio. You can find this one. Well, that goes back to the point that I made that, yes, there are dangerous dogmen. I've said it all along that there are dangerous dogmen that will kill you as soon as look at you if the opportunity presents itself. But the main takeaway I've always stuck to is, as a whole, they are not wired to be that way. There are people, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, there are people who will kill you if they get the opportunity. There are horses, there are dogs, there are camels, pigs, goats that will harm you if they have the opportunity because they're just deviant. They're wired to be dangerous. So why should Sasquatch, why should dogmen be different? But that doesn't mean for a second that people, goats, pigs, horses, you name it, are wired as a whole to be dangerous and harm you as soon as the opportunity presents itself. So, yeah, that's the main point I'm making. Yes, there are dangerous examples of the species, but as a whole, as far as being programmed just by nature, dogmen wanting to just kill you as soon as they have the opportunity, that clearly is not the case. The evidence states that. The next question is from Mars Stahl, and Mars' question is, did you go back to look for tracks?
Okay, and before I answer that, I did want to hit on what you said. I think you need to show respect for all animals in the woods. Bear will attack and kill you given the right opportunity. And I think a lot of this Sasquatch and everything else that you meet up with depends on how they've been treated in the past. You have to look at things. You have to know all the facts about what's going on with something before you can just say it's dangerous. But I'll go back to did I go look for tracks? Yes. The next day we did go back. We took pictures of the location, but it was grass. It was a forested area and it was just a clearing in the middle of the forest. And there was no area that there could have been tracks. We couldn't find any.
Yeah, considering the trauma you were suffering from, I'm not surprised you didn't head back there to look for them. That probably would have been a big mistake, so I'm glad you didn't, to say the least. The next question is from, scrolling here, the Polish mom. So if you believe in Dogman now, do you believe in everything else? UFOs, little people, rakes, etc.
Well, it has changed my world. Um, I do believe in a lot more out there than I used to. Uh, as far as UFOs, those I've always thought were real, but little people and stuff like that, I do believe they're probably out there. There's probably a lot of things that we've never run into before. And I'm 55 years old. I was 55, been in the woods all my life before I finally saw a dog man. So, yeah, I believe that there are other things out there now.
You know other things are out there, unfortunately. The next one is from Brian Wallace, and Brian wants to know, are you afraid to see more dogmen?
I'm a little unnerved, but I think it depends on what context that I see them in. Is I don't want one coming up to my camp, but I don't want a Sasquatch coming up to my camp either. But although it does happen, I think if I'm somewhere else in a setting like I was in a vehicle or something, I'd be open to seeing another one. But I I don't know. It's just so hard to say.
How about in an M1 Abrams hovering at 1,000 feet? Would that be better? I mean, if you have a dogman encounter, that's the best way to see it, in my opinion, if you're worried about being traumatized by it.
Yeah, that
But
would be the best way.
yeah, it would be, definitely. The next one's from Baby Girl, and her question is, you mentioned Wendigo. Have you possibly had a Wendigo encounter?
No, personally, I haven't, but I do know someone who possibly did have a Wendigo encounter, so I know they're out there too.
Yes, they are. And I missed touching on something from Lyson's question earlier about the LBL murder or the alleged LBL murder. And then there's another one that he quoted that supposedly happened in Ohio. There was an eyewitness who came on the show named Matt who had an encounter, a traumatic encounter inside an abandoned factory or an old warehouse. Well, he posed that as another case of people, I think 4 people that he claimed, that Lyson claimed were going to be murdered. Well, there's no way to know that because the dogman, it did what is pretty commonly done in dogman encounters. It made those guys, those boys that day, that night, think that it wanted to kill them. But as capable as dogmen are, if they wanted to kill you, in almost every case, if it had full access to you, the way that Dogman had full access to those boys that day, I don't care if they went up above and quote unquote saved themselves by trying to hide up on that mezzanine, that elevated area. If that Dogman wanted to get to them, it would have gotten to them. And on the way home, that's another opportunity. If it wanted to get to them, it would have gotten to those boys and slaughtered them if it wanted to do so. But the reason why they got away was because it did not want to harm them. Their MO is to go out of their way to make sure they frighten you to within an inch of your life, just the way that Dogman did to Matt and his buddies that night. And then once that's accomplished, okay, good, I got what I wanted. It goes its way and lets you go your way. Does that sound familiar? Because that's exactly what happened that night to Matt. So, yeah, it's all too easy. With eyewitnesses, that's when the problems start. When you start making more of an encounter than is actually there. When you turn a situation where you think a Dogman was trying to kill you and turn that into, oh my God, he was definitely trying to kill us. Well, like I said, these guys are so athletic, so fast, so strong. Their implements of destruction are so impressive. If they want to kill you, they're going to get to you and kill you. If you get away, 99.9% of the time, it's because they allowed you to. They just wanted to create the illusion, and they're masters at creating that illusion to make you convinced that they wanted to kill you. That's why it's so hard for so many eyewitnesses to come to terms with their Dogman encounters. That's something that Mike from episodes 504 and 508, last week's show, we talked about extensively. Is Mike, I told him, Mike, don't let these guys make you convinced that they actually wanted to kill you that day, because if they wanted to, they would have done it. But you're here today because they clearly did not want that to happen. They just wanted to get a rise out of you. So, yeah, anyone listening to this, please keep all this in mind. All right, moving on. I guess I can step down off of my soapbox here and we can move forward. I'm on quite a roll tonight, actually. I need to calm down. Looking for the next question, which would be from Stephen Jackson. Vic, I think I had an encounter. That's why I found Dogman YouTube podcasts. Well, I hope you didn't, but if you have had an encounter and you want to talk with me about it, Stephen, then all you have to do is just go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report, and yeah, by all means, I'll schedule a conversation with you and we'll take it from there. The next question is from Robin, and Robin's question is, Vic, do you think Dogmen get fixed on one person and follow them from the point of first contact on? Well, it can seem that way with some eyewitnesses. They definitely come back and pay that eyewitness visits from time to time in some cases, but how much following is done, how often are they actually around that person, no one can say. All we can do is guess, really. So unfortunately, I can't answer that question for you. All I can do is guess. Let's
I'll
see
let
the
you
next.
head out there.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I said I'll let her know as soon as I head back out to that area.
Yeah, I hope you do go back, but like I said, I'm going to qualify that when you're good and ready. Not too much weight on a young back, like I've said. I've got another question for you, Lisa, from Elaine Isabel. And that question is, could you see how long the claws were?
No, because like I said, we never actually could see the body. All we saw was the eyes and the outline.
Yeah, you can only go by what you saw. It's not your fault that you didn't see them. I've got another one for you from Baby Girl, and her question is, did the Dogman make any sounds?
No, it did not make any sounds, and if it made any sounds, I mean, I've heard people say that they make these sounds when they stand up, like bones cracking, but when we started moving on the gravel, I would not have been able to have heard that from the gravel on the street, but while we were sitting there, it never made a sound at all.
I didn't think it had. I've got another one for you from Stephen Jackson. Stephen wants to know, did you hear anything in your head?
Just fear. I just heard what am I looking at? And this thing is not something that I understand. I never heard any voices or anything like that.
Some eyewitnesses report mind speak, but yeah, most don't. So that's no surprise there. Doesn't make any different from most eyewitnesses. I've got a comment by Baby Girl. She says, they live off our fears, but I don't think they're wired to kill humans. Well, they're not. Yeah, the numbers definitely prove that. And thank goodness. Can you imagine a world where these guys were out to kill you as soon as they had the opportunity? That's not the kind of world I want to live in. That wouldn't be good. Good luck spending any time in the woods if that's the case. Yeah, no spending time in the woods then. Well, it looks like I've got another question for you. And this one is from Glades Creature. And their question is, were any fogs or shadow hazes with this dog man?
No, I didn't see anything like that. Like I said, all there was this total quiet that was unnerving.
I'm glad there wasn't any fog or mist or shadow hazes out there. That would just make this whole experience that much more frightening. It really would. I've got another one for you from Murtaza Arif. And Murtaza's question is the land that you saw the Dogman ancient land? Is that why you think Dogman occupies it?
Well, this location where we actually saw this, there is some history there. There are old salt mines in the area, and the whole area has these like underground salt mines. And I think there's a lot of strange activity in that area because, most animals do require salt in their diet. And I think that maybe this area has a lot of activity because of the salt content.
You might be onto something there. Yeah, pretty much everything out there needs salt, especially predators. But, I mean, ungulates, they need salt too. So I guess you can count them in also. It's funny in the comments, Cindy Imhoff is trying to encourage me, which is never a good idea. Her comment is, haha, Vic, you're funny. Don't calm down. Yeah, don't encourage me. I'll get back on that soapbox and start babbling about that stuff. Well, it's almost time for us to get out of here, Lisa. But before we do, you host a podcast of your own called Cryptids Unlimited. Please tell us about it.
Yes, it's a new podcast, and I'm only like at episode 11. And it's basically I started it because people had Bigfoot sightings and didn't know who to talk to. And I wanted to give them a platform to just come tell their stories. And I named it Cryptids Unlimited because I didn't want to, make it about just Bigfoot. I mean, there's other things out there too. And I knew that, or I wouldn't have named it that even before I saw Dogman. But, there's other cryptids out there too. And I want everybody to be able to come talk about it. And like you said, talking about it, it makes you feel better. It really does. And the more you talk about it, I think the more you come to terms with it. And so, yeah, I hope everybody will come over and at least give us a visit. I need all the help I can get.
Well, of course, yeah, you're just getting started. And for everyone listening, I hope you do check out Lisa's channel. And to make it really easy to find, if you go to the description for tonight's show, you're going to find a link that'll take you right to her channel. So, like I said, I really hope you do check it out. But having said that, like I said earlier on, if you've had a Dogman encounter of your own that you'd like to speak with me about, it doesn't matter if you want to just speak with me about it in private and never do a show, or if you want to do a show as well. Please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you do that, then I'll be sure to reach out to you and, contact you to schedule a conversation so we could have a good talk about it. But having said that, thanks again so much for coming on and sharing the details of that experience with us, Lisa. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Because, like you said, talking about it does make you feel better.
It really does. It really does. Well, thanks again so much for your time and have a great night.
Thank you, Vic. You too.
Thanks. We'll see ya.
All right. Bye-bye.